The massive space station hung in the darkness like a silver wheel spinning slowly among the stars. Haven's Gate was the largest neutral meeting place in the galaxy, built by dozens of alien races working together. Its curved metal walls gleamed under the light of 3 nearby suns. Ships from many worlds docked at its ports, bringing diplomats and traders from across known space. Ambassador Kate Morrison stood at the viewing window of her transport ship, watching the station grow larger as they approached. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. At 45 years old, she had spent most of her life learning how to talk to difficult people and find peaceful solutions to hard problems. But this mission was different. This time, she was not dealing with other humans. She was going to meet alien races that could destroy Earth without much effort. Behind her, Danny Walsh checked his tablet for the 100th time. He was Kate's aide, a young man with red hair and nervous energy. He had been working with Kate for 3 years, ever since humanity joined the galactic community. Danny always worried about details, making sure meetings started on time and everyone had the right documents. "The Zephyrians are already on the station," Danny said, looking up from his tablet. "They arrived 2 days ago with a full war party. 12 warriors and their war prime." Kate nodded, but did not look away from the window. "What about the others?" "The Centaurians came yesterday. So did the Blue Fleet from the Outer Rim. The small races are here too, the Finns, the Rock People, and the Metal Speakers. Everyone is waiting to see what happens." In the corner of the room, a quiet man sat reading a book. Commander Ryan Blake looked like he might work in an office somewhere. He was average height with brown hair going gray at the sides. His clothes were simple and clean. Nothing about him seemed special or dangerous. Most people forgot he was in the room after a few minutes. That was exactly how Ryan liked it. Ryan had been assigned to protect Kate during this mission. On paper, he was just a security chief with a boring job. In reality, he was something much more dangerous, but nobody needed to know that right now. "Docking in 5 minutes," the ship's captain announced over the speakers. Kate turned away from the window and smoothed down her dark blue diplomatic uniform. The clothes were made from Earth materials but designed to look respectful to alien eyes. She wore no jewelry except for a small pin showing the Earth flag. "Remember," Kate said to Danny, "we are here to stop a war, not start one. The Zephyrians have been fighting with the Coalition for 2 years. Millions have died on both sides. If we can get them to agree to peace talks, we might save millions more." Danny nodded quickly. He understood how important this was. Humanity was still new to galactic politics. 3 years ago, humans thought they were alone in the universe. Then alien ships appeared in Earth's sky and everything changed. Most of the galaxy welcomed humans as friends. But some races thought Earth's people were too weak and young to matter. The Zephyrians were the biggest problem. They were tall beings with skin like living crystal that changed colors with their moods. They had conquered dozens of worlds and believed that only the strong deserved to survive. When they first met humans, they laughed. Humans had no great armies or superweapons. Human worlds were peaceful places full of farmers and artists and scientists. But that was exactly why the Galactic Coalition asked Kate to try making peace. Maybe the Zephyrians would listen to someone who was not their enemy. Maybe humans could find a way to stop the fighting that other races could not see. The ship shuddered slightly as it docked with the station. Through the walls, Kate could hear the sounds of machinery and the hiss of air pressure equalizing. Soon they would walk into a room full of beings who could crush planets. "Are you ready?" Kate asked her team. Danny picked up his tablet and a bag full of papers and documents. He looked nervous, but determined. Ready, Ambassador. Ryan closed his book and stood up. He had been reading about station security systems, but nobody asked him about that. All set, he said in a voice so ordinary that people tended to forget what he sounded like. The airlock door opened with a soft whisper of air. Outside, the station's receiving area was larger than most buildings on Earth. The ceiling stretched, up so high it was lost in shadows. Beings from a dozen different worlds moved through the space, talking in languages that sounded like music or grinding rocks or electronic signals. A tall, thin alien with blue skin approached them. It wore flowing robes and had 4 arms that moved like water. Ambassador Morrison, it said in perfect English, I am Speaker Veltar of the Centaurian Republic. Welcome to Haven's Gate. Kate smiled and bowed slightly, the way she had practiced. Thank you, Speaker Veltar. We are honored to be here. The other delegations are eager to meet you, Veltar said. Your reputation as a peacemaker has spread far beyond Earth. As they walked through the station's corridors, Kate noticed how other beings stopped to stare at the humans. Some looked curious. Others seemed worried. A few looked unfriendly. Ryan walked behind Kate and Danny, his eyes moving constantly. To anyone watching, he seemed like a bored bodyguard doing an easy job. But Ryan was mapping every exit, counting every security camera, and noting which beings carried weapons. The station was beautiful in an alien way. The walls were covered with art from many worlds, crystal formations that sang when touched, metal sculptures that moved like living things, and paintings made of light that shifted and changed. But Ryan was more interested in the guard posts and the weapon scanners and the emergency systems. They reached the diplomatic quarter where the peace talks would happen. Kate's rooms were comfortable but simple. Earth had requested nothing fancy, wanting to seem humble and peaceful. The first meeting is tomorrow morning, Danny said, checking his schedule. All 12 races will be there. Kate looked out the window of her room at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, ships were fighting and worlds were burning. Tomorrow, she would try to find words that could stop it all. Ryan checked the locks on the doors and tested the communication systems. Everything seemed normal, but something felt wrong. He had learned to trust that feeling over many years of dangerous work. He would watch carefully and hope his worries were just imagination, but in a station full of beings who could destroy worlds, imagination and reality were sometimes the same thing. The great meeting hall of Haven's Gate could hold 500 beings from different worlds. Today, it held only 24. 2 representatives from each of the 12 races involved in the peace talks. The room was built in circles, with each delegation sitting at curved desks that faced the center. Floating translation devices made sure everyone could understand each other. Kate Morrison sat at the human desk with Danny Walsh beside her. Behind them, Ryan Blake stood against the wall like all the other security guards. The room was full of beings that looked like living legends, creatures with tentacles for arms, others that glowed with inner light, and some that looked like walking trees made of metal. At the far end of the room sat the Zephyrian delegation. War Prime Krextal was enormous even by his people's standards. His crystal skin was deep red, which Kate had learned meant anger or aggression. Beside him sat Sub-Commander Nexaval, whose skin showed patches of orange and yellow. Both Zephyrians wore armor made from the same crystal material as their skin, but shaped into sharp edges and points. Speaker Veltar of the Centaurians stood up to begin the meeting. His 4 arms moved gracefully as he spoke. We gather today in hope of ending the conflict that has torn our galaxy apart for 2 years. Ambassador Morrison of Earth has offered to help us find a path to peace. Krextal's crystal skin flashed brighter red. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. Peace? With these soft creatures from a world of dirt and water? They have been in space for only 3 years. What could they possibly know about war or strength or honor? Kate had expected this. She stood up slowly, keeping her face calm and her voice steady. War Prime Krextal, we come not because we are great warriors, but because we are not. Sometimes those who have not fought can see solutions that fighters cannot. The Zephyrian leader laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think your weakness is wisdom? Your people have never conquered a world. You have never felt the joy of crushing your enemies. You build homes instead of weapons, and you grow food instead of taking it from others. This is not strength. This is cowardice. Around the room, other delegates shifted uncomfortably. The rock people, who were made of living stone, made grinding sounds that meant worry. The metal speakers clicked and hummed to each other in their electronic language. Everyone could feel the tension growing. Danny's hands shook slightly as he took notes on his tablet. He had read about Zephyrian aggression, but seeing it in person was different. These were beings who could tear a human apart with their bare hands, and they clearly wanted to do exactly that. Ryan watched from his position against the wall. To anyone looking, he seemed bored and unimportant. His eyes appeared to be focused on nothing in particular, but he was actually studying the Zephyrian guards, counting their weapons, and noting how they moved. He had also spotted 3 exit routes and 2 possible defensive positions if things went bad. Kate did not back down from Krextal's verbal attack. You call us weak because we choose to build rather than destroy. But I have seen the reports from your war with the Coalition. Your fleets are strong, but they are smaller than they were 2 years ago. Your warriors are brave, but fewer return from each battle. Strength that destroys itself is not strength at all. Krextal's skin went so red it was almost black. He stood up, towering over everyone else in the room. How dare you speak of our losses? Every Zephyrian who dies in battle dies with honor. We do not fear death like your pathetic species. I do not speak of fear, Kate replied calmly. I speak of waste. You are losing your best warriors in a war that cannot be won by fighting alone. The Coalition has more ships than you do. They have more worlds. If this continues, even your strength will not be enough. Sub-Commander Nexaval's skin flashed orange with surprise. She knows our fleet numbers? Danny looked up from his tablet. Humans are very good at mathematics and logistics. We study problems carefully before we try to solve them. This was not entirely true, but it was not entirely false either. Human intelligence services had been working very hard to understand the Galactic War. Earth's survival might depend on knowing which side was winning. Krextal's rage was making the air around him shimmer with heat. Crystal beings could raise their body temperature when angry, and the War Prime was furious. Numbers mean nothing. 1 Zephyrian warrior is worth 10 Coalition soldiers. A delegate from the Blue Fleet, a being that looked like a jellyfish floating in a gravity field, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. If that were true, War Prime, you would have won already, but the war continues and your people die, and nothing changes. Several other delegates made sounds of agreement. The metal speakers chimed in harmony. The tree-like beings rustled their metallic leaves. Even some of the smaller races that usually stayed quiet were nodding their various types of heads. Krextal, looked around the room and saw that everyone was listening to the human instead of respecting Zephyrian strength. This was exactly what he had feared when he heard about the peace talks, weak creatures using words to make his people look foolish. "You think you understand war?" Krextal snarled at Kate. "Your species has never faced real battle. When the first Zephyrian fleet arrives at Earth, your people will surrender before the fighting even begins." The room went very quiet. Several delegates made shocked sounds in their various languages. Threatening Earth directly was not just rude, it was a violation of galactic law. Kate's face stayed calm, but her voice became colder. "Is that a threat against Earth, War Prime?" "It is a promise," Krextal said. "When these peace talks fail, as they will, the Zephyrian Empire will remember who tried to make us look weak." Ryan's position against the wall had not changed. His face still looked bored and ordinary, but something had shifted in the way he held his body. His weight was now balanced differently. His hands were loose at his sides instead of clasped behind his back. The change was so small that nobody noticed it. Nobody except for one of the Zephyrian guards, who had been trained to spot combat readiness in different species. The guard looked at Ryan more carefully and felt a small chill of unease. Something about the human security chief had changed when Krextal threatened Earth. Speaker Veltar raised all four of his arms for attention. "War Prime Krextal, threats against member worlds are not permitted in neutral space. I must ask you to withdraw your statement." Krextal's skin was now so red it looked like liquid fire. "I withdraw nothing. These humans come here pretending to be peacemakers, but they are spies and weaklings. They waste our time with their pathetic words." Kate stood up again. Her voice was still calm, but now it carried an edge that made everyone listen. "War Prime, you are angry because your war is not going as planned. You are frustrated because strength alone has not given you victory. You attack us with words because you cannot attack us with weapons in neutral space. But consider this. If we are as weak as you claim, why did 12 different races ask us to mediate? Perhaps they see something in humanity that you do not." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the room, delegates from different worlds watched to see how Krextal would respond. Some of them were indeed curious about what made humans special enough to attempt something that had been impossible for 2 years. Ryan continued to watch and wait. He could feel the violence building in the room like pressure before a storm. The Zephyrians were warriors who solved problems with strength. When words made them look weak, they turned to action. But they had no idea what kind of action might be coming back at them. 3 levels below the diplomatic quarters, in the maintenance sections of Haven's Gate, a different kind of meeting was taking place. The corridors here were narrow and poorly lit, filled with the hum of machinery and the smell of recycled air. Most beings avoided these areas unless they worked there. Vexmore moved through the shadows like liquid crystal. He was Krextal's younger brother. But where the War Prime was large and obvious, Vexmore was smaller and deadly quiet. His skin showed muted colors, grays and dark blues that helped him blend into the dim corridors. He had come to the station. Secretly, hiding among the maintenance workers and cargo handlers, behind him followed 6 other Zephyrians, all trained in what their people called shadow warfare. They were not the massive warriors who fought in open battle. They were the ones who struck from darkness and disappeared before their enemies knew they were dead. "The human quarters are on level 7, Vexmore whispered to his team. "Security there is light. Station guards patrol every 2 hours. Their equipment is standard Coalition technology. Nothing we cannot handle. One of his followers, a female named Zetra, flickered her skin in patterns that meant questions. What about the human security chief? Our intelligence says he is former military. Vexmore's skin showed colors of amusement, pale yellows and greens. One aging human with a boring job? He probably pushes papers and checks locks. These people have been at peace for generations. They have forgotten how to fight. The team moved deeper into the station's hidden spaces. Vexmore had spent weeks studying Haven's Gate through stolen blueprints and bribed maintenance workers. He knew every corridor, every ventilation shaft, and every security blind spot. The station's builders had focused on preventing large-scale attacks, not small teams of infiltrators. Above them, Kate Morrison was having dinner with several other delegations. The talks had continued for 3 days since the first meeting, with small progress each day. The Centaurians were supporting human mediation efforts. The Blue Fleet was interested in trade agreements that might come with peace. Even some of the smaller races were starting to speak up with their own ideas, but the Zephyrians remained hostile. Krextal attended every session but spent most of his time making threats and insults. He called humans soft skins and dirt crawlers. He said their homeworld was so weak that one Zephyrian ship could conquer it alone. Danny Walsh was getting tired of taking notes about Zephyrian rudeness. He sat in the human quarters, typing reports that would be sent back to Earth through quantum communication. The reports were mostly hopeful. Other races were cooperating, and real progress was possible if the Zephyrians could be convinced to participate honestly. Ryan Blake sat in a corner of the room, cleaning a small device that looked like a standard security scanner. In reality, it was much more than that. The device could detect hidden weapons, map electronic systems, and record conversations from a distance. Ryan had been using it to study the station's security while pretending to do routine safety checks. What he had found worried him. "Danny," Ryan said in his quiet voice, "have you noticed anything strange about the maintenance schedules?" Danny looked up from his typing. "Maintenance schedules? I don't really pay attention to that stuff. Why?" "The humans are the only delegation whose quarters get daily maintenance visits. Everyone else gets service every 3 days, like the station manual says. But we've had someone working on our air systems, our water recyclers, and our communication arrays every single day." Danny shrugged. "Maybe they want to make sure the newest members of the galactic community are comfortable?" Ryan did not think. Comfort was the reason. Each maintenance visit gave someone access to their rooms when the humans were at meetings. Each visit was a chance to plant listening devices, sabotage equipment, or map their security arrangements. Professional paranoia had kept Ryan alive through many dangerous situations, and it was screaming warnings now. "I'm going to do a security sweep," Ryan said, standing up with his scanner. "Is that really necessary?" Danny asked. "This is a neutral station. Everyone here is supposed to be safe." Ryan looked at Danny with the kind of expression that had once made enemy soldiers surrender without a fight. "Danny, someone tried to poison Kate's food yesterday. The day before that, the gravity in her sleeping area malfunctioned and nearly crushed her. This morning, her personal computer was infected with a virus that could have accessed our diplomatic files. Do you think those are accidents?" Danny's face went pale. He had assumed the problems were just bad luck or unfamiliar alien technology. The idea that someone was actively trying to hurt them had not occurred to him. Ryan spent the next hour scanning their quarters with his device. He found 7 listening devices hidden in the walls and furniture. He found a small explosive charge attached to the air recycling system, not big enough to destroy the room, but large enough to fill it with poisonous gas. He found that their communication system had been modified to send copies of all messages to an unknown location. "We're being watched and targeted," Ryan told Danny quietly. "Someone wants us dead, but they want it to look like an accident." Far below, Vexmore was reviewing the final details of his plan with his team. They had spent days learning the humans' routines and weaknesses. Kate Morrison attended every formal session, but also had private meetings with moderate delegates who might support peace. She was doing exactly what Vexmore had hoped, building support for a peace agreement that would make the Zephyrians look like the aggressors. "Tomorrow night, there will be a celebration dinner," Vexmore told his followers. "All the delegations will be there except us. The humans will think they have succeeded in isolating us politically. They will be relaxed and confident." Zetra's skin showed patterns of eagerness. "That is when we strike? That is when we end this charade," Vexmore confirmed. "But not just the human ambassador. All of them. Every delegate who supported this peace nonsense will die. When the station discovers the bodies, they will find evidence that humans were planning to attack Zephyrian civilians. The galaxy will see that these peacemakers were actually preparing for war." The plan was elegant in its brutality. Vexmore would eliminate the human diplomatic mission and frame them for terrorism at the same time. The other races would be so shocked by human betrayal that they would beg the Zephyrians for protection. Instead of being isolated aggressors, the Empire would become the galaxy's defenders against human treachery. "What about the human security chief?" one of the team asked. Vexmore's skin showed dismissive colors. "A paper pusher with a fancy title. He will die with the others, probably while trying to hide under a table." None of the Zephyrian infiltrators had any military intelligence training. They were assassins and saboteurs, skilled at killing but not at analyzing enemy capabilities. If they had looked deeper into Ryan Blake's background, they would have found records that were heavily classified and completely terrifying. But those records were buried so deep that even most human governments did not know they existed. The galaxy certainly had no idea what kind of creature they were planning to corner. Above them, Ryan finished his security sweep and began making preparations of his own. He could not prove who was targeting them, but he knew an attack was coming soon. The pattern of escalation was too obvious to ignore. He checked his personal equipment one more time. Hidden in his ordinary clothes and luggage were tools that most beings would not recognize as weapons. To anyone watching, Ryan Blake looked like exactly what he claimed to be: a boring security chief doing a routine job. Tomorrow night, that carefully maintained illusion would be tested in ways that would shock the galaxy. The breakthrough came during the morning session of the 5th day. Kate Morrison had been working quietly with individual delegations, finding common ground and building trust one conversation at a time. Her patient approach was finally paying off. Speaker Veltar of the Centaurians stood to address the assembly. His 4 arms moved in graceful patterns as he spoke. "The Centaurian Republic formally supports the peace framework proposed by Ambassador Morrison. We believe this plan offers hope for ending the bloodshed that has consumed our galaxy." A ripple of excitement went through the hall. The Centaurians were one of the most powerful coalition members. Their support meant the peace talks had real strength behind them. The representative of the Blue Fleet, a graceful being that seemed to float rather than sit, spoke next. "The Blue Fleet also supports this framework. We have lost too many ships and too many lives to this conflict. It is time to seek another path." One by one, other delegations added their voices to the growing chorus of support. The metal speakers chimed their agreement in harmonic frequencies. The rock people made grinding sounds that meant approval. Even the smallest races, who usually stayed quiet during big decisions, spoke up to support the human proposal. Danny Walsh could barely contain his excitement as he took notes. This was beyond what anyone had hoped for when the talks began. Kate had not just brought opposing sides together, she had created something like unanimous support for peace. Only the Zephyrians remained silent. War Prime Krextal sat like a red crystal statue, his skin showing deep colors of anger and frustration. Beside him, Sub-Commander Nexval looked nervous, her skin flickering between orange and yellow. Kate stood to address the room. "I am honored by your support, but this framework means nothing if it cannot include all parties to the conflict. War Prime Krextal, your people have the right to be heard. What would it take for the Zephyrian Empire to consider these peace terms?" Krextal's skin flashed brighter red. For a moment it seemed like he might explode with rage, but then something unexpected happened. Nexval leaned over and whispered something in his ear. The War Prime's colors dimmed slightly as he listened. "The Zephyrian Empire requires guarantees," Krextal said finally. "We will not be treated as conquered peoples. We will not give up territory that was won in honorable battle. And we will not accept oversight from races we have defeated." Kate nodded thoughtfully. "Those are reasonable concerns. Perhaps we could discuss autonomous zones and mutual defense agreements instead of territorial concessions. The goal is not to punish anyone, but to find a way for all races to prosper without destroying each other." For the first time since the talks began, Krextal seemed to be actually listening instead of just waiting for his turn to make threats. Kate had learned enough about Zephyrian culture to know that honor and respect mattered more to them than territory or resources. "You would guarantee that Zephyrian worlds remain under Zephyrian rule?" Nexval asked. Her skin was now showing. Blues and greens, colors that meant interest and hope. "Absolutely," Kate replied. "This framework is not about conquest disguised as peace. It is about finding ways for different peoples to coexist without constant warfare." The session continued for 3 more hours, with detailed discussions about trade agreements, border security, and dispute resolution. To everyone's amazement, Krextal participated in the conversations instead of disrupting them. He was still aggressive and demanding, but he was negotiating rather than simply refusing to cooperate. When the session ended, delegates from across the galaxy approached Kate to offer their congratulations. The elderly representative of the Finn people, a small being covered in silver fur, shook Kate's hand with all 6 of his tiny fingers. "Remarkable," he said in a voice like wind through leaves. "We have been trying to end this war for 2 years. You have brought us closer to peace in 5 days than we managed in 24 months, Speaker Veltar agreed. "Your species has a gift for seeing solutions that others miss. Perhaps that is why you were chosen for this task." Kate smiled, but remained modest. "We have not achieved peace yet. We have only agreed to try. The real work comes in making these agreements work in practice." As the delegations scattered to their quarters to prepare for the evening celebration, Danny could not stop grinning. "Kate, this is incredible. Wait until Earth hears about this. We might actually have done it." Ryan Blake had watched the entire session from his usual position against the wall. He was pleased by the progress, but his professional paranoia was working overtime. Success made people careless, and careless people got killed. "Danny," Ryan said quietly, "I want you to stay close to Kate tonight. Don't leave her side during the celebration." "Why? What's wrong?" Danny asked, his excitement fading into worry. "Maybe nothing," Ryan admitted. but someone has been trying to hurt us for days. Now that we're close to success, they might try something desperate. Meanwhile, 3 levels below the diplomatic quarters, Vexmore was making his final preparations. His team had spent the day moving weapons and equipment into position near the celebration hall. They had disabled several security cameras and modified the station's emergency systems to delay any response. The humans think they have won, Vexmore told his followers. They will be celebrating their victory tonight, surrounded by all their new alien friends. They will not expect death to come for them in their moment of triumph. Zetra checked her weapons one final time. What about the brother? Krextal seemed to be cooperating with them today. Vexmore's skin showed colors of contempt. My brother has been seduced by their soft words and false promises. He has forgotten that strength is the only truth that matters. When the humans are dead, he will remember who he really is. The plan was simple and brutal. During the celebration dinner, when all the delegates were gathered in one room, Vexmore's team would strike. They would kill Kate Morrison first, making sure her death was public and brutal. Then they would eliminate as many other delegates as possible before activating the evidence they had planted, weapons and documents that would make it look like humans had been planning a terrorist attack. The galaxy will see the truth about these creatures, Vexmore said. Behind their peaceful words and diplomatic smiles, they are predators waiting to strike. When we expose them, the Coalition will turn against Earth and beg us for protection. None of the Zephyrian infiltrators knew about Ryan Blake's real background. Their intelligence reports described him as a former police officer who had moved into private security. They saw him as a middle-aged human with soft hands and a boring job. They had no idea that those soft hands had killed over 200 enemies in conflicts across 3 star systems. They did not know that his boring job was cover for one of the most dangerous men humanity had ever produced. They certainly did not understand that cornering Ryan Blake with innocent people in danger was like trapping a wolverine in a box full of rabbits. Above them, the celebration was beginning. The main dining hall had been decorated with art and music from all the participating worlds. Tables were arranged in a great circle, with each delegation sitting next to their new partners in peace. The lighting was warm and festive, and the air was full of the sounds of different races trying to communicate and celebrate together. Kate wore her finest diplomatic uniform and smiled as beings from across the galaxy offered her toasts in dozens of different languages. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax and enjoy the moment. Ryan stood against the wall as always, watching the celebration with quiet eyes. But tonight, his attention was not on the exits and defensive positions he had memorized. Tonight, he was watching for the attack he knew was coming. The evening that started with hope would end with the galaxy learning what humans were really capable of when someone they cared about was threatened. The celebration reached its peak as Kate Morrison stood to address the gathered delegates. The great dining hall was filled with beings from 12 different worlds, all sharing food and drink and hope for the future. Soft music played from hidden. Speakers and the lighting cast warm shadows that made even the most alien faces seem friendly. Kate raised her glass of earth wine, a gift she had brought to share with new friends. 5 days ago, we came here as strangers divided by war and mistrust. Tonight we stand together as partners in peace. We have proven that different peoples can find common ground when they choose to listen rather than fight. Around the room, delegates raised their own drinks in response. Speaker Veltar lifted a crystal goblet filled with Centaurian nectar. The Blue Fleet representative raised a floating sphere of liquid that somehow stayed suspended in the air. Even the rock people, who did not drink anything, held polished stones above their heads in tribute. To peace, Kate continued, and to the understanding that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. May our children grow up in a galaxy where words settle disputes instead of weapons. The room erupted in sounds of approval. Cheers, musical tones, electronic chimes, and deep rumbling voices all mixing together in a symphony of hope. Danny Walsh felt tears in his eyes as he watched his boss achieve something that had seemed impossible just a week ago. Ryan Blake stood in his usual position against the wall, but his attention was not on the celebration. Something felt wrong. The maintenance staff who had been setting up the room had included faces he did not recognize. 3 of the service doors showed signs of recent tampering, and the emergency lighting system had been modified in a way that made no sense for normal operations. Kate was halfway through her speech when the lights went out. Emergency lighting should have activated immediately, but instead, the room was plunged into complete darkness. In the confusion, beings from different worlds called out in their various languages, trying to understand what was happening. Some races could see in the dark better than others, but the sudden change had disoriented everyone. The first energy blast lit up the darkness like purple lightning. It came from the service door nearest to the human table and struck Kate directly in the chest. The impact threw her backwards, her diplomatic uniform smoking from the plasma burn. She crashed into the wall and slid to the floor, leaving a trail of blood on the decorative panels. Death to the human deceivers. Vexmore's voice roared through the darkness as more energy blasts began firing from multiple positions around the room. Panic erupted as delegates realized they were under attack. The Centaurians tried to shield themselves with their multiple arms. The Blue Fleet representative's jellyfish-like body pulsed with defensive electricity. The smaller races screamed and dove under tables, while others tried to reach the exits only to find the doors had been sealed. This is what happens to those who trust human lies, Vexmore shouted as his team continued firing into the crowd. See how they bleed when their deception is revealed. Plasma bolts seared through the air, striking decorative walls and food tables. The attack was meant to be public and brutal, a demonstration that humans were vulnerable and their alien allies were fools for trusting them. Each shot was carefully aimed to create maximum terror and confusion. Danny crawled across the floor toward Kate, his tablet forgotten as he tried to reach his wounded boss. Kate! Kate, can you hear me? Kate's eyes fluttered open, but her breathing was labored and blood stained her lips. The plasma bolt had burned through her diplomatic armor and damaged her lung. She tried to speak, but could only whisper, Danny, get to safety. More energy blasts filled the air as Vexmore's team methodically worked their way around the room. They wore vision enhancement gear that let them see clearly in the darkness, while their targets stumbled blindly. The plan was working perfectly. The humans were dying. Their alien friends were helpless. And soon, the galaxy would see video recordings that proved human treachery. Where is the human security chief? Zetra called out as she fired at a group of cowering delegates. I want to see this famous Earth warrior. Vexmore's skin glowed with triumph colors as he moved toward Kate's position. Probably hiding under a table like the coward he is. These humans talk about peace because they are too weak for war. But Ryan Blake was not hiding under a table. When the lights went out, Ryan's combat training had kicked in immediately. While everyone else was confused and disoriented, he was already moving. The emergency lighting modifications he had noticed earlier told him exactly what was happening. Someone had prepared this room for an ambush. Ryan dropped to the floor and rolled behind an overturned table as the first energy blast lit up the darkness. His eyes adjusted quickly to the low light, and his mind automatically began calculating angles, distances, and threat assessments. 7 attackers, possibly more. Energy weapons, military grade, coordinated assault pattern, professional operation. None of the Zephyrian infiltrators saw him move. To them, the human security chief had simply vanished when the shooting started. Ryan reached into his jacket and withdrew what looked like a standard diplomatic scanner. But when he twisted the device in a specific pattern, it transformed into something much more dangerous. The scanner's outer shell fell away, revealing a compact weapon designed by Earth's most classified research programs. "Can you see the human security chief yet?" Vexmore called to his team as he approached Kate's bleeding form. "I want him to watch his precious ambassador die." "I don't see him anywhere," Zetra replied, sweeping her weapon across the room. "Maybe he ran when the shooting started." Vexmore laughed, the sound echoing through the darkness. "Perfect! Let the galaxy see how Earth's protectors abandon their people when real danger comes." He raised his energy weapon toward Kate's unconscious form, preparing to finish her execution in front of the hidden cameras that were recording everything. This would be the moment that turned the galaxy against humanity forever. The weapon never fired. Something moved in the darkness behind Zetra, something that made no sound and cast no shadow. Her enhanced vision gear should have detected any threat, but the scanner showed nothing. She began to turn, sensing danger she could not identify. She never completed the movement. Ryan Blake materialized behind her like a ghost made solid. One hand covered her mouth, while the other did something quick and efficient to her neck. Zetra dropped to the floor without making a sound, her weapon clattering away into the darkness. "Zetra?" Vexmore called out. "Report your position." There was no answer. Around the room, the other Zephyrian infiltrators began to realize that something was wrong. Their communication network had gone silent. Their carefully planned ambush was suddenly missing pieces. "Find the human!" Vexmore snarled, his triumph turning to unease. "He cannot have gone far." But Ryan Blake had not gone anywhere. He was still in the room, moving through the darkness like death itself, and the Zephyrian infiltrators were about to learn what happened when someone threatened a human diplomat. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity had sent more than just a peacemaker to Haven's Gate. They had sent someone who could wage war with a precision and lethality that would redefine what it meant to be dangerous. The celebration of peace was over. The education of the galaxy was about to begin. The silence where Zetra should have been responding sent ice through Vexmore's crystal veins. In all their planning, they had never considered that a human might pose a real threat. Humans were weak creatures from a peaceful world. They solved problems with words and compromise, not violence. "Nextar, cover the east exits," Vexmore commanded through his communication device. "Kelvor, sweep the west side. The human must be hiding somewhere." Static answered him, then more static. One by one, his team members were failing to respond. "This is impossible," Vexmore whispered to himself, his skin flickering with colors of confusion and growing fear. "They are just humans." Across the darkened room, delegates from 12 worlds huddled in terror behind overturned tables and decorative pillars. Some were wounded from the initial barrage of energy fire. Others tried to help their injured companions while staying hidden. From the attackers, they could not see. Danny Walsh crouched beside Kate Morrison, pressing his jacket against the plasma burn in her chest to slow the bleeding. She was unconscious, but still breathing, which meant there was hope. But they needed medical help soon, and the attackers were still out there somewhere. "Kate, please hold on," Danny whispered. "Help is coming. It has to be coming." But no help was visible. The room's communication systems had been sabotaged. The exits were sealed. Station security was either dead or unable to reach them. They were trapped with killers in the dark, and their only protection was a security chief who had seemed to vanish the moment the shooting started. Ryan Blake had not vanished. He had simply become what he truly was. For 15 years, Ryan had worked very hard to appear ordinary. He dressed in plain clothes, spoke in a quiet voice, and did everything possible to seem like a boring, middle-aged man with a simple job. The illusion was so complete that even he sometimes forgot what lay beneath the surface. But when Kate Morrison was shot and Danny Walsh was in danger, the illusion shattered like glass. Ryan moved through the darkness with a fluidity that seemed impossible for someone his age. Every step was silent. Every movement was economical and precise. His breathing was so controlled that thermal sensors could not detect him. His mind processed the tactical situation with a clarity that turned chaos into simple mathematics. 7. Attackers. 6 still active after Zetra's elimination. Plasma weapons with approximately 40 shots each before reload. Night vision equipment giving them significant advantage. Coordinated assault pattern suggesting military training against one human with improvised weapons and 15 years of carefully suppressed killing skills. The odds were not in the Zephyrians' favor. Nextar was sweeping the western side of the room when death found him. He had enhanced hearing that could detect a heartbeat at 50 meters, but he never heard Ryan approaching. Something struck him in the spine with surgical precision, and he collapsed instantly. His weapon was taken before his body finished falling. Kelvor was scanning the eastern exits when his communication device went silent. He turned to investigate and found only darkness where his teammate should have been. "Nextar, report your status." No answer came, but Kelvor felt eyes watching him from the shadows. He raised his energy weapon and fired randomly into the darkness, purple bolts illuminating brief glimpses of overturned furniture and cowering aliens. Nothing that looked like a human threat. Then the lights went out on his night vision gear, and Kelvor realized he was no longer the hunter. Vexmore was beginning to understand that something was terribly wrong with their perfect plan. His team was disappearing one by one, eliminated by an enemy that seemed to exist only as empty air and sudden death. "Show yourself, human coward," Vexmore roared into the darkness. "Face me with honor, instead of skulking in shadows." A voice answered him from everywhere and nowhere, calm and conversational in tone. "You shot an unarmed diplomat during a peace celebration. You sealed the exits to trap innocent civilians. You're lecturing me about honor?" Vexmore spun toward the sound, but his enhanced vision showed nothing. The human's voice seemed to come from multiple directions at once, as if he were somehow speaking from inside the walls themselves. "I am Vexmore of the warrior caste," the Zephyrian snarled. "I have killed hundreds of enemies in honorable combat." "I know who you are," Ryan's voice replied, still coming from everywhere. "Vexmore, third son of War Chief Hexdale, trained in shadow warfare at the Krexasana Academy. 67 confirmed kills, specializing in infiltration and assassination. Very impressive resume." Vexmore's skin flashed with confusion. How could this human know classified Zephyrian military information? "Who are you?" Ryan Blake, the voice, answered simply. "Formerly of the 3rd Special Operations Regiment, Human Colonial Defense Force. 213 confirmed kills across 3 planetary conflicts. Currently employed as a diplomatic security specialist." The words hit Vexmore like a physical blow. 213 kills? That was more than most Zephyrian war chiefs accumulated in their entire careers. But humans were supposed to be peaceful creatures who avoided conflict. "Impossible," Vexmore whispered. "Humans do not fight wars." "We don't start them," Ryan agreed, "but we finish them." Another of Vexmore's team members stopped responding to communication. Then another. The human was systematically destroying trained Zephyrian warriors with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. "How?" Vexmore demanded, fear beginning to crack his warrior composure. "How can one soft-skinned human defeat trained soldiers?" Ryan's voice, when it came again, was patient and educational. "You made several tactical errors, Vexmore. First, you assumed humans were weak because we prefer peace. That's like assuming a sword is dull because it stays in its sheath. Second, you attacked civilians under my protection. That was a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Vexmore asked, though he was no longer sure he wanted to know the answer. "The kind that gets you killed." The remaining lights in Ryan's night vision equipment went dark. His enhanced hearing detected movement behind him, but when he turned, there was nothing there. Panic began to replace training as Vexmore realized he was being hunted by something that moved through darkness like a living shadow. Around the room, delegates who had been cowering in terror began to notice that the energy weapon fire had stopped. No more purple bolts were lighting up the darkness. The voices of their attackers had gone silent one by one, replaced by sounds they could not identify. Brief scuffles, muffled impacts, and then nothing. Danny Walsh still knelt beside Kate, but now he was looking around in confusion. "What's happening? Where are the attackers?" He got his answer when emergency lighting finally flickered back to life. The sudden illumination revealed a scene that would be talked about in diplomatic circles for generations to come. 6 Zephyrian. Infiltrators lay motionless around the room, their weapons scattered and their night vision gear destroyed. They had been eliminated with such precision that most delegates could not even tell how they had died. There were no blast marks, no signs of struggle, no evidence of the brutal combat that had just taken place, and in the center of the room, Ryan Blake stood over the last attacker with the same calm expression he had worn while checking door locks and scanning for listening devices. His clothes were slightly wrinkled but otherwise undamaged. His breathing was steady and controlled. He looked exactly like a middle-aged security chief who had just finished a routine inspection, except for his eyes. His eyes held depths that made veteran warriors from a dozen different worlds take involuntary steps backward. Vexmore lay at Ryan's feet, alive, but completely immobilized. The Zephyrian's crystal skin flickered with colors of terror and disbelief as he stared up at the human who had destroyed his entire team without breaking a sweat. "Medic!" Ryan called out in the same ordinary voice he used for everything else. "I need medical assistance for Ambassador Morrison immediately." But every being in that room was staring at him with new understanding. The quiet man in the corner, the boring security chief who never drew attention to himself, had just demonstrated what humans were truly capable of when someone they cared about was threatened. The galaxy's education about humanity had begun in earnest. The emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the dining hall, revealing the aftermath of something that no delegate from any world had ever witnessed before. 7 Zephyrian infiltrators, each trained in the deadliest combat techniques of their warrior culture, lay scattered around the room like broken toys. Ryan Blake stood in the center of the carnage, checking Kate Morrison's pulse with the same methodical care he had shown while examining door locks. To the terrified delegates watching from behind overturned tables, he looked completely unchanged from the boring security chief they had barely noticed for 5 days. But appearances, they were learning, could be deceiving beyond imagination. Speaker. Veltar of the Centaurians was the first to find his voice. His forearms trembled as he pointed at the motionless Zephyrian bodies. How did you do this? They were trained warriors with advanced weapons and night vision equipment. Ryan looked up from Kate's unconscious form, his expression as calm as if someone had asked him about the weather. They made noise when they moved. They breathed too heavily. They assumed I would fight the way they expected humans to fight. But there were 7 of them, the Blue Fleet representative whispered, her jellyfish-like form pulsing with colors of shock and awe. 7 trained killers with military equipment. Yes, Ryan agreed, as if this was simply an interesting fact worth noting. Though technically, only 6 were combat effective. The leader, Vexmore, was more focused on making speeches than maintaining situational awareness. Vexmore himself lay paralyzed but conscious near Ryan's feet, his crystal skin flickering weakly, with colors of pain and terror. Ryan had struck him with precise pressure point attacks that disabled his nervous system without causing permanent damage. The Zephyrian could hear and see everything, but he could not move or speak. "This is impossible," groaned one of the wounded infiltrators who was still barely alive. "Humans are weak creatures, peaceful farmers and merchants. They do not know warfare." Ryan walked over to where the wounded Zephyrian lay bleeding from multiple injuries that had been inflicted so quickly the alien could not remember receiving them. "You're confusing peaceful with defenseless," Ryan explained patiently. "We prefer to solve problems without violence because we're very good at violence. When someone threatens people we care about, we stop being peaceful. The rock people, whose stone bodies had protected them from the energy weapon fire, made grinding sounds that meant deep confusion. But your species has no warrior caste, no military culture, no history of conquest." "True," Ryan acknowledged. "We don't glorify war or celebrate conquest. But we've been fighting each other for thousands of years before we ever met aliens. We learned to be very efficient at killing because we had to be. There were always more humans to fight." "Danny." Walsh finally found his voice, though it came out as a frightened whisper. "Ryan, what are you?" Ryan looked at Danny with something that might have been sympathy. "I'm exactly what I told everyone I was. A security specialist assigned to protect. Diplomatic personnel. It's just that you never asked what kind of security work I did before this job." Around the room, delegates from 12 different worlds tried to process what they had witnessed. The quiet human who had stood against walls and checked door locks had just eliminated an entire team of elite Zephyrian assassins with no apparent effort. He had moved through darkness like a living shadow, struck with precision that seemed impossible, and emerged from combat looking like he had been filing paperwork. The elderly representative of the Finn people, his silver fur standing on end, with shock, spoke in a voice like wind through autumn leaves. "We have heard stories of human conflicts from your historical records. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could destroy entire cities. But we thought those were ancient times, before your people learned wisdom. They were ancient times, Ryan confirmed. We did learn wisdom. We learned that violence should be a last resort, used only when peaceful options have been exhausted. But we never forgot how to be violent when necessity required it. Station security forces finally managed to breach the sealed doors and pour into the dining hall. They stopped in shocked silence when they saw the scene inside. 7 Zephyrian infiltrators had somehow been defeated by a single middle-aged human who looked like he worked in an office. The security chief, a massive being, from a warrior species known for their combat prowess, approached Ryan with visible nervousness. "Sir, we need to secure this area and process the crime scene. Can you tell me what happened here?" Ryan gestured at the unconscious infiltrators scattered around the room. Zephyrian extremists attacked the peace celebration. They wounded Ambassador Morrison and threatened the other delegates. I neutralized the threat and secured the area. Medical assistance is required for the ambassador immediately. The security chief looked around at the devastation, overturned tables, scorch marks from energy weapons, and 7 defeated warriors who were supposed to be among the deadliest fighters in the galaxy. "You neutralized all of them? By yourself?" "Yes," Ryan said simply. "How?" Ryan considered the question seriously. "Training, experience, and the fact that they underestimated what humans are capable of when someone we care about is in danger." Medical teams rushed in to treat Kate and the other wounded delegates. As they worked, word of what had happened began to spread throughout Haven's Gate Station. Within hours, the story would reach every corner of the galaxy through quantum communications networks. But the story that spread was not the one Vexmore had planned. Instead of showing human weakness and treachery, the hidden cameras had recorded something that made every military strategist in known space reassess their understanding of Earth's people. The footage showed a human diplomat working patiently for peace while beings from other worlds mocked his species as weak and irrelevant. It showed the same human standing calmly when threatened, speaking softly when insulted, and maintaining perfect diplomatic composure even when facing aggression. Then it showed what happened when someone tried to murder that diplomat in front of her protector. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as Ryan Blake transformed from a quiet security chief into something that moved through darkness like death itself. They saw him eliminate trained warriors with an efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. They witnessed combat skills that made their best soldiers look like children playing with toys, but most importantly, they saw him immediately return to caring for the wounded once the threat was eliminated. No gloating, no celebration of victory. Just a quiet man doing his job with lethal competence and then going back to checking on injured people. War Prime Krextal, who had been in his quarters during the attack, arrived at the scene to find his brother lying paralyzed and defeated. The massive Zephyrian leader stood over Vexmore's motionless form, his crystal skin cycling through colors of rage, shame, and something that might have been fear. "You brought dishonor to our family and our people," Krextal rumbled at his unconscious brother. "You attacked guests in neutral space. You violated every law of civilized warfare, and you failed." Ryan overheard the comment as medical teams prepared to transport Kate to the station's hospital. "War Prime, your brother and his team are alive. They'll recover from their injuries. That was a choice I made." Krextal turned to stare at the human who had single-handedly defeated 7 Zephyrian warriors. "You could have killed them all?" "Yes," Ryan said matter-of-factly. But Ambassador Morrison would prefer that disputes be resolved without unnecessary deaths, even when those disputes involve people trying to murder her. The War Prime's skin went through several color changes as he processed this information. The human had shown mercy to enemies who had shown none to him. He had demonstrated combat skills that would be legendary among Zephyrian warriors, then chosen not to use those skills to their fullest extent. For the first time in his life, Krextal was beginning to understand why other races thought humans might be worth listening to. The celebration of peace had become a demonstration of war, but somehow the human way of fighting had made the possibility of peace seem more real than ever before. 3 days after the attack, Ambassador Kate Morrison sat up in her hospital bed and signed the Haven's Gate Peace Accords. Her hand was steady despite the bandages covering her chest, and her voice was clear as she read the final statement that would end 2 years of galactic warfare. The signing ceremony was smaller than originally planned, but more meaningful than anyone had expected. Representatives from all 12 worlds were present, including War Prime Krextal of the Zephyrian Empire. The massive crystal warrior's skin showed deep blue colors that meant respect and humility, emotions that other races had never seen from a Zephyrian before. Ryan Blake stood in his usual position against the wall, looking exactly like the boring security chief he had pretended to be for 5 days. But nobody in the room could look at him the same way anymore. The quiet man in the corner had become the most famous human in the galaxy, though he seemed completely unaware of his celebrity status. Danny Walsh sat beside Kate's bed, still shaking slightly when he remembered the night of the attack. He had watched his unremarkable boss transform into something that redefined what it meant to be dangerous, then transform back into someone who worried about proper diplomatic protocol while covered in enemy blood. The Zephyrian Empire agrees to immediate cessation of hostilities, Krextal announced as he pressed his crystalline hand to the peace document. We acknowledge that strength without wisdom leads only to destruction, and we pledge to seek understanding with our former enemies. Speaker Veltar of the Centaurians added his signature with all 4 hands. The coalition accepts this pledge and offers mutual respect to all Zephyrian worlds. We have learned that peace requires courage from all parties. One by one, the other delegates signed the accords that would reshape the political structure of the galaxy. The metal speakers chimed their agreement in harmonic frequencies. The Blue Fleet representative made her mark with flowing tentacles. Even the smallest races, who had been terrified observers during the attack, spoke their commitment to the new peace. But the real ceremony had taken place 3 days earlier, in a dining hall filled with darkness and violence. Every being in the galaxy had seen the footage by now. The recording showed exactly what happened when someone attacked a human diplomat and discovered that death itself had been standing quietly in the corner. Ambassador Morrison, Krextal said when the formal proceedings were complete, I owe you an apology that words cannot express. My brother's actions brought shame to my people and nearly destroyed the peace you worked so hard to create. Kate smiled, though the movement caused her obvious pain. War Prime, your brother was driven by fear and pride, emotions that all species understand. What matters is that you chose a different path when you had the chance. Krextal's skin shifted to colors of deep gratitude. Your security chief could have killed every member of Vexmore's team. He showed mercy to enemies who had shown none. This is a kind of strength that Zephyrians are only beginning to understand. Ryan looked up from his position against the wall, his expression as calm and unremarkable as always. War Prime. Mercy isn't weakness. It's a choice strong people make when they can afford to be generous. The comment sent ripples of understanding through the assembled delegates. This human had demonstrated combat skills that made legendary warriors look like beginners, then chosen not to use those skills to their full extent. He had shown that true strength meant knowing when not to kill, even when killing would be easier. Over the following weeks, the story of Haven's Gate spread to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Military academies studied the recordings to understand how one human had defeated 7 elite warriors. Diplomatic schools analyzed Kate Morrison's negotiation techniques. Philosophers debated what the incident revealed about the nature of strength and peace. But the most important audience was ordinary beings across the galaxy who were just beginning to understand what humanity represented. The humans were not the mighty conquerors who built vast empires through force. They were not the ancient wise ones who guided younger races with superior knowledge. They were something new and different, a species that had mastered both the art of making peace and the science of making war, then chosen to use both skills in service of something greater than themselves. Earth's colonies, which had been seen as easy targets for aggressive expansion, suddenly became places that even the most warlike races approached with caution, not because humans were eager for battle, but because they had proven they could fight with a precision and lethality that made conquest a very expensive proposition. Ambassador Kate Morrison became known throughout the galaxy as the Diplomat, who had turned enemies into allies through patience and wisdom. But it was Ryan Blake who ensured that no one ever again made the mistake of confusing human preference for peace with inability to wage war. Ryan himself remained unchanged by his sudden fame. He continued to stand quietly against walls during diplomatic meetings, checking door locks and scanning for security threats. He spoke in the same ordinary voice and wore the same unremarkable clothes. To most observers, he seemed exactly like what he claimed to be, a middle-aged man with a boring job. But now everyone knew what lay beneath that carefully maintained surface. The galaxy had learned that when humans sent diplomats to dangerous places, they brought death as insurance. Not the flashy, honor-bound combat of warrior cultures, but something much more frightening: the quiet, professional application of lethal force by someone who treated killing as simply another job that needed to be done efficiently. The message was clear, and it reached every corner of known space. Humans prefer peace. They will work tirelessly to find diplomatic solutions to even the most intractable conflicts. They will show patience with insults, mercy to enemies, and generosity to former foes. But if you attack their diplomats, if you threaten their people, if you mistake their preference for peace as inability to fight back, you will discover that they send their peacemakers with guardians who can wage war with a cold precision that will haunt your nightmares. The Haven's Gate. Peace accords held for decades, becoming the foundation for a new era of galactic cooperation. Trade flourished between former enemies. Cultural exchanges replaced military conflicts. The galaxy began to see benefits from peace that had been impossible during years of constant warfare. And in quiet conference rooms and diplomatic receptions across known space, Ryan Blake and others like him stood against walls and checked door locks and made sure that the peace their colleagues worked so hard to build was protected by people who understood exactly what war really cost. The galaxy had learned to see humanity not as weak newcomers or potential conquerors, but as something much more valuable, the species that could bring both peace and the absolute certainty that peace would be defended by whatever means necessary. In the end, that combination of diplomacy and deadly competence made humans the most trusted mediators in galactic politics. Because everyone knew that when humans promised peace, they meant it. And when they promised that peace would be protected, they meant that too. The quiet man in the corner made sure of it.